We've been listening to the interview with a man who let this convicted terrorist go free today. You heard my exclusive interview with the Scottish Justice Secretary. Now let's hear from two people who lost loved ones on the Pan Am Flight 103 bombing. Rabbi Stephanie Bernstein's husband was killed. Michael Bernstein. Brian Flynn lost his brother, J.P. Flynn. Brian, I'll start with you. What did you think of what the Scottish minister had to say?
Well, after watching that, my first reaction was to think back to an expression my Irish grandmother had was, "Who do you think you are?" Because how dare he speak with such self-righteousness? I thought when I first heard his speech today that I thought it was driven by cowardice and political expediency, but then when I saw this interview, it actually was driven a lot by vanity as well. He's just relishing in this moment, and it's an atrocity in and of itself, but that interview just made it worse.
What about for you, Stephanie?
Well, to me it represents naivete, naivete that somehow releasing this man is the right thing to do. We saw that he was greeted with a hero's welcome in Tripoli this evening, and I'm sad to say that I think our president is naive as well. That was almost more shocking to me than the interview with McCaskill.
Why was what President Obama said
to say
naive?
That this man should be under house arrest? The White House has not been in touch with us, contrary to what he said, unless something happened today that I'm unaware of. And the White House and this administration could have made a difference. We'll never know, because they did not weigh in early, they did not weigh in publicly, and for the president to say that this man should be under house arrest shows grave naivete, in my point of view.
Brian, do you agree?
Yeah, and I think one of the things that was not mentioned at all is you're sending this guy, and you mentioned it, Wolf, briefly, but you're sending this guy back to the people who ordered him to commit the murder. I mean, this is not a new country. There's not new leadership. Megrahi was behind it. And I think that there's this lack of understanding that, oh, we want him to go home to his family and die. Well, let's send him back to the people that ordered the hit. I mean, we fought for, and Stephanie's been with us the entire time, we fought for 20 years to get some morsel of justice. There's only one man in prison. He didn't do it alone. He was working for Libyan intelligence. And now we have a situation, but even that one guy was taken away from us.
You're a rabbi, Stephanie,
yes.
and we heard the minister, the Scottish Justice Secretary, repeatedly say two wrongs don't make a right in defending his decision.
Well, I think one thing to think about is that this man could have been and was treated compassionately in prison for his illness. That does not mean that he should be released in order to go back, as Brian said, to the regime that caused the bombing to begin with and killed my husband and Brian's brother and so many other people.
Tell me something about Michael Bernstein, your husband.
My husband was a Nazi hunter. He worked for the Office of Special Investigations at the Department of Justice. He was the Assistant Deputy Director. So one of the ironies here is that he was committed and in effect gave his life to bring to justice what we would call the foot soldiers of the Holocaust.
And those are your children, the picture we're showing right behind you?
Yes, those are, I can see them on, those are my children. They're now 28 and 24. And they did not get the benefit of growing up with their father. So the idea of justice is very important here. Justice to me means that we care just as much about justice for the foot soldiers as we do for the people who masterminded the bombing.
Brian, tell me something about J.P. Flynn, your brother.
He was a great older brother. When he died, I was only 20 years old. He's a year and a half older than me. And it was the typical case of the older brother who took care of his younger brother, and we played sports together all the time. And it was interesting. There was a quote soon after he died that someone said, it's a real shame that we no longer have JP because he's the type of man who would have made a difference. And that's something that I try to imbue in my kids, that they have a responsibility now that they've survived.
The Scottish minister, he may be watching this program right now. We're seeing around the world and in Scotland. I wonder if you have anything you want to say to him.
No, I said I was one of the people who participated in the video conference in July, and I gave a victim impact statement. I'm beyond sickened, and I truly don't understand how he could have made this decision and how he can sleep at night, quite frankly.
Brian, what about you? You have something to say to him?
I'd have a lot to say to him if he was here in person. Some of it's not quite appropriate for the program. But I think one thing I would say is that he didn't just betray America and dishonor the victims. I also think the Scottish government has betrayed its people. I mean, this was not an attack just on the United States because it was a U.S. airliner. This was an attack on Scotland. And this image keeps coming to my mind of the little boy 4 days before Christmas running home and the plane landing on him and he gets burned up in jet fuel, and how that image didn't stop him from releasing. The other thing that was fascinating to me, I did some research today. Do you know that 60 to 100 people die every year in Scottish prisons of natural causes? He doesn't release any of them, and none of them are mass murderers. Why did he release this one?
And I asked him repeatedly if there was one precedent of any murderer ever in Scotland who has been released because he or she was suffering from a terminal disease, and he didn't have one precedent.
No,
and he's the Justice Secretary. He should have those legal precedents if there are some.
Yeah.
Did you know that, I think it was, he said 30 have been granted, 30 compassionate releases have been granted. 6 were rejected. What did those people do that he rejected them and he let this guy go?
Fair point. All right, we're going to have to leave it right there, but I suspect this story is not going away. Let me express to you and to all the families of the victims of Pan Am Flight 103, 270 people died on that day, 189 Americans. Our deepest, deepest condolences. I know it doesn't get any easier all these years later.
Thank you both.
Thanks to both of you for coming in. A new bombshell from America's first Homeland Security Secretary.